Huntington Life Sciences financial backers putting out, I think it was roughly 7 million shares of the stock. And that was unbelievably successful. It started seeing people leaving this national demonstration to go to their areas of the country, and they were fired up. They were ready to start up local chapters, helping out the SHAC campaign, helping out whatever way they can to target their financial pillars of board, a shareholder, stockbroker, etc. And I became involved with that campaign. It was something that I thought was going in a tremendously beautiful direction, that it could go and develop a model for other activist organizations to use and therefore be successful. It was the first ever mode of corporate attack where it utilized the Achilles heel of companies and said, we're going to get that Achilles heel, we're going to take this company out by means of finances. And I thought this strategy was better than anything I've ever seen, and it's something I wanted to be a part of, so I volunteered my efforts whenever I could. Whenever I wasn't working or whenever I wasn't at school, I was doing something to try and help the SHAC campaign. Like I said, I think it's the best campaign to date. And because I think it's the best campaign to date, it also received some of the strongest repression to date. Coincidentally, around that same year, in September 11th of 2001, were the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And I don't even want to go into that because that entire situation was countless violence here in America, but also uncalled for violence in other countries, and the violence still continues to date, and thousands of people are dying every, say, week. So I think it's absolutely horrible. I think that we could, we should always keep that in our thoughts, but I don't want to go off on a topic that is going to take us away from this thought. I was violated in my probation. For December, I went up to Boston to speak at a small conference related to the Stevens campaign, which Stevens was the largest investor in Huntington Life Sciences at the time. I went up to Boston, went to go speak there, and I was arrested, pulled over by some federal agents, and detained there briefly. Was released on no charges, but because I was there, they contacted my parole officer, and my parole officer violated me and then sent me to court. The judges went and said to me then that I have to serve a 1-year sentence for my violation of probation. I'd be exonerated from my probation, and then I'd be out at the end of 1 year. I served a total of 7.5 months from that point forward. So in April of 2002, I was in prison. It was probably my 3rd month in prison for the 2nd time now. And I started to lose hope. And there were things going on around me at this prison which were much more raucous than when it was at the first prison. There were stabbings there were sexual assaults there were countless violent fights happening every day. The COs were abusing people. I just saw a lot worse things there than I saw at the first prison where I was, and it was really getting to me. And I'd find myself, there was a window by an alleyway where I could sit next to a cot for, I think, periods of like from 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and also from 9 to 11 in the morning. And I used to sit there and I'd watch, and even though it was April and still kind of cold outside, there were flowers and dandelions and other weeds that were breaking through the pavement and just ripping it all up in this alleyway and helping make way, which was once nothing but pavement, for something that looked somewhat beautiful. I didn't have any access to outside surroundings. There was no yard. Our yard was just a concrete square in the middle of the jail, so it was a concrete courtyard. There was no grass. The blue sky that I saw was only from looking above through barbed wire, and I never had any communication with the outside surroundings. And this is something that I was really used to, because I really liked hiking, I really liked bike riding and jogging, things like that in the outdoors, and I think that was my release during the time. So it helped really to develop a lot of depression in my life. But when I saw these weeds, I started thinking about it, and I wrote a little thing about it in the Earth First Journal. And the weeds were finding any crevasse they could within that pavement to try and get through. And through frost wedging, or whatever you want to call it, they were figuring out ways of meandering through, anywhere from 6 to 7 inches of pavement to break through the pavement and develop, into beautiful flowering dandelions. And even though these things are commonly discarded as weeds, I think philosophically that's something that we need to think about in our lives, because I drew a conclusion at that point that every punk rocker, every anarchist, every DIY kid, every activist, to the mainstream's eyes, the people that don't have yet to understand them or yet to come to terms with them and never had an opportunity to relate to them, to the American public that is yet to come to terms with these issues. We are weeds. We're undesirables. We're degenerates. And us as degenerates are going to be able to get through tough times. Are going to be able to get through a situation like our current standard of living, which is 6 or 7 inches of pavement. We're going to break through that. We're going to find any nook and cranny that we can, any open space, any Achilles heel. We're going to break through that. And one weed eventually will poke through the surface, but it's not going to be a single weed's effort. It's going to be all of ours taking advantage of that crack that that first weed made. Maybe that weed will die out after 1 year, but then that crack will still be remnant and allow space for another weed to come through and another crack to form. And as the cracks get bigger, it'll just be a matter of inertia at that point before we eventually are winning. And that pavement, that metaphoric pavement, is what I call the garden of a better tomorrow in my writing. Because eventually, that pavement's going to be no more. That alleyway in the jail, probably this year versus 2002, that alleyway is probably now twice as absorbed by weeds and dandelions than it was then. And there's some other prisoner that's looking out that window that sees greenery now. There's going to be some other prisoner a decade from now that sees nothing but greenery and had no knowledge of the pavement even being there. And yeah, this is just a microcosm of the issues that we're dealing with here. But this was something that I could look to in that regard and say, all right, I see this happening in this microcosm. And I know that if this little plant that starts out as a seed can figure out a way of getting through this pavement and figuring out a way and just not giving up because that's all it knows is its self-survival and its own determination, then I know that I'll be able to do it myself. And so I looked around me. I looked around for the other social support I was getting from the other weeds, the other activists, the other people that could help me. And I saw support in actions that were reported back through magazines that the ALF was doing, that the ELF was doing, that countless animals were freed, that there was 40 animals freed from Marshall Farms in upstate New York. And when I saw that, it just opened up my heart again and said, you know, there's room for hope in here. There's not 90% despair, it's now 60% despair and 40% hope. And I'm gonna eventually get that hope to overwhelm myself and get back into this. And when I get out of jail, I'm gonna come out swinging again and show the cops and the feds and everybody that thought they could get me down and still be able to do it. And I don't think I'm a particularly strong person. I just got out there and I did it. And I know that there's other people in this room that are tougher and stronger than me. And so what I say is go ahead and do it. Don't be afraid, because I made it through that. I made it through that, started out a weak little emo kid. And, you know, it's a difficult situation to go through at the time, but I made it through it. I know that everyone in this room will make it through it. Everyone in this room is probably stronger than me and will do a better job than me. Maybe someone could cite this speech that I gave right now, no matter how filled with stuttering and, you know, debacle it was. You'll be able to find something in it to say, you know what, maybe I can get through this situation, maybe it'll help me. So I got out, got back involved with the Animal Defense League, with the Shack campaign, and our campaign against Huntington Life Sciences. And every day I'm finding hope in the campaign against Huntington Life Sciences, because I find myself interested in issues all across the board. I want to do things to help children in sweatshops. I want to stop the destruction of our natural environment. I know that this is all basically coming back to one original root, which is modern day capital and global capital that's causing every industry out there to take profit and give it more value than the value of the environment, the value of the natural world, the value of a sentient life. And I know that if I'm able to be a part of something that could be set as a model for everyone else to use, something that is successful, then every other campaign can cite our example and say, I'm going to use this type of campaigning strategy to go forward and stop child labor at sweatshops. I'm going to use this particular type of campaigning and go forward and stop deforestation. I'm going to use this type of campaigning and go forward and stop the racism of the prison industrial complex. And the Huntington Life Sciences campaign, where I find my hope is in local, strategic, task-based organizing and the way it relates to a national campaign. So I do stuff on Long Island.